Okay, guys, welcome to another edition of Rotten Reviews. On this edition, I'm going to take a look at Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter from 2012. It has a 34% on the tomato meter and a 50% on the audience score. This is considered rotten. However, in my opinion, it doesn't really deserve to be completely rotten. Um, I would put this at just a hair above rotten in my personal view, because this movie was meant to be completely entertaining, and I found it entertaining. It isn't supposed to be a historical drama. It's not supposed to be about the very dull politics of the day prior to, during, or after the Civil War. It is simply supposed to be a what-if fantasy scenario involving what would happen if Abraham Lincoln was fighting vampires, because the South had employed vampires in their army to win the Civil War. No politics here, just fantasy fun, and I'm going to get into the reviews and find out how well this movie has aged after 7+ years. So right off the bat, from October 26, 2019, we have a 4-star review. Fun, what more can you say? Continuing, 5 stars, we loved it. Fun and quirky with just enough truth in history that we really enjoyed it. 3 stars, it's an okay movie, nothing special, an interesting concept but poorly executed. I lost interest when the horses became super horses. Yeah, that's what did it for me as well. I was really with this movie all the way until we came to the scene in which there is a bridge collapse. The train is going over the bridge, and as we've seen in Western movies so many times before, it's a cliche. The action scene of a locomotive, a steam locomotive, going over a wooden bridge, and the wooden bridge collapses, and the train either partially or completely goes down into a giant cavern or chasm. um, it's so cliched and boring, and I was really pulled out of this movie when we got to that scene, and in particular how that scene, how the protagonist Abraham Lincoln and sidekick survived that scene. It was so ludicrous and over the top, and also boring, because we've seen that type of thing too many times before. That's what really pulled me out of this. The scene with the horses didn't pull me out too much. It was more like a video game type battle. A lot of this was almost like something you would see in a well done video game of sorts. But I was largely entertained, and I would say if I had to put a star rating on this, I would give it 2.5 stars, almost hitting 3, but not quite 3, because some of the action sequences, particularly the train scene, it was just too cliched, unrealistic, and it just didn't need to be there. We needed to see something new. The premise, of course, is something new in itself, but we needed to see action scenes that were more than what we'd seen a million times before in action Western movies. Um, let's continue on. 3.5 stars. Usually I am not a fan of blood gore type movies, but I actually found this movie pretty good. Helps that Benjamin Walker is easy on the eyes, and the subtle humor throughout the movie adds to the enjoyment. This is by no means meant to be realistic or factual, so they were able to have a lot of creative freedom, and I thought they did a good job. I'll largely agree with that, but I wouldn't say it's 3.5 stars. Right away when you have a title like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, you're not expecting a 3-4 star production. You're expecting to be entertained by something crazy. You're not expecting an Academy Award winner by any means. Let's move on. 2 stars. Such a far out concept that I just went with it. The film does take itself a little too seriously. Yeah, I'll agree with that. The film does take itself too seriously. There are some small humorous points in this movie, but it's not, it's even less than what you would get out of an MCU, a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. You don't even get that much humor out of it. It needed to poke fun of itself a little bit more, I thought, and yet it didn't, particularly in the action scenes. It was just straight up expecting us to 100% take it serious. I liked that they took it serious, the vampires fighting for the South and the battles that ensued in that vein. I thought that was cool. But again, at other points in the movie, it should have lightened up a bit, and it really didn't. And, that's why I wouldn't put this at 3 stars, so I agree with that. 1 star, so silly it could be fun. What we got instead was a terribly written, uneducated, stupid plot holes out the wazoo, and a so ridiculous it's dumb approach that leaves an aftertaste of a popcorn fart. I don't even remember this, and I think I saw it twice because I couldn't believe how dumb it was. The part with the train collapsing was so ludicrous, it was watching the entire film become a train wreck, but it didn't happen. If it had ended there, I think we could have been better off if it happened. Terrible film, don't even bother watching. This is way too harsh. Of course, it's supposed to be stupid. There are supposed to be plot holes. You have to go into a movie like this expecting plot holes right away when you see the title alone. However, I do agree that the train collapse, like I said, that was not needed. It was cliched. It was obvious that somehow the good guy, Abraham Lincoln, of course, wasn't going to fall down with the train into the wreckage. And that's another thing that kind of it took it out of being completely serious. The serious approach was wrong because we already know historically that Abraham Lincoln didn't die fighting vampires. So you're not under the amount of tension you would be if it was some minor character in history that was in the same situation, because it's plausible that they might have died. But Abraham Lincoln doesn't die in this fashion. So that's why I also say the movie shouldn't have expected us to take itself so seriously, unless it wanted to make Abraham Lincoln a minor character and make one of the other characters the major character. I think that might have worked better, but we'll never know, will we? Let's move on. 3.5 stars. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is an enjoyable popcorn type film with some fast-paced action, a quick-moving plot, and decent acting. At times a little too heavy on the preachy historical goody two-shoot side, when a film like this could have benefited from a bit more campy fun, a la FDR American Badass. Yet definitely will hold your attention and keep you entertained. I'll agree with this. It should have played itself more humorous, and also it did preach a little bit. Like I said at the beginning, this wasn't a political film about the Civil War, but it did kind of show Abraham Lincoln as a little bit too of a do-gooder, Boy Scout type persona, and I'm not even sure if that's historically accurate. That's just the way they pushed it, but they pushed it in a way that it expected us to take that seriously. It didn't push, the Boy Scout side of Abraham Lincoln in a comical way, which I think it should have done it in that way. So it's kind of a lost opportunity. 5 stars. If you can believe in Jesus or Allah, then you can believe Lincoln was a vampire hunter. Script was very tight. Every scene drove story or built characters. Better superhero film than Avengers Endgame. That's pushing it. I think Avengers Endgame and this are trying to do two totally different things. So comparing them is literally like apples and oranges. So I wouldn't even try. Now, when we talk about the believability of this, well, if you got past the title and actually paid to see this in the theater, then you already were willing to believe in this, right? So they're not hiding anything from you just by the fact that it's in the title. Again, they make a good point. People will take Jesus or Allah or whatever else 100% seriously, and yet, why not take this seriously? Certainly, not to offend people, we have a lot more historical record concerning Abraham Lincoln than we do either Allah or Jesus or anybody else in those biblical or Quran stories. That's just a fact. So if you do want to work with historical material, why not work with Abraham Lincoln? So I agree in a large part, but this is no 5-star film. This is clearly peaking out at 2.5 stars. 1.5 stars. My expectations were pretty low, but I somehow actually ended up liking it even less than I thought I might. The big set pieces seem to be what Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is all about, and they are so bad, just abysmal. Well, again, I'll agree. Some of the big set pieces were overdone, too much like video game action. And like I said, the train scene, it was just anticlimactic for a bunch of reasons. We'd seen it too many times before as well. 5 stars. Anyone who doesn't see how brilliant this movie is beyond help. 10 stars. Amazing. No. Now, if you were telling me that the book was, because this is based on a book, I might agree with you. You could support that with a little bit more. But this film is nowhere near 5 stars. It is 2.5 max. 4.5 stars. The cinematography is really good, acting not so bad, and it's like no other vampire movie. You'll never see a president in a vampire movie. I'm not sure we never have in some capacity, but yeah, this is the first time I've heard of an actual president as a character in a movie fighting vampires. Um, Personally, the only thing I might find more entertaining is one with JFK fighting vampires. But, we might get that someday, who knows. 3 stars, watchable, better than the title suggests. Yes, I would suggest that the title comes off as complete ridiculousness. This actually is not completely ridiculous. It keeps you entertained. 4 stars, one heck of a movie. 5 stars, entertaining, supernatural, superpower action adventure flick. If you are a fan of Preacher, I highly recommend giving this a watch. Yeah, the character from Preacher is in this. I think he would have probably made a better main character than having Abraham Lincoln as the point of view main character. Just for the sake of tension alone, because we know what happens to Lincoln. 5 stars. Nothing wrong with this movie. I disagree. It had a big budget, and yet it squandered a lot of the big set pieces on things that could have been a lot better. Also, implausibility. Yeah, we know it's not plausible that Abraham Lincoln was fighting vampires, etc. But within this story world, some of the stuff in the action was implausible. For example, the locomotive on the train tracks on the bridge, the way the vampire kicked out the supports, yet the train just managed to stay barely ahead of the collapse, etc. We'd seen that kind of implausible nonsense in so many action westerns before, but this time it was just a little too much. It really pulled me out of it. 4 stars. In the name of alternate universes, this one takes the cake. Many take aim at what is not great. However, for me, there are none. This movie is awesome. It's a matter of taste. 5 stars. Loved it. It was awesome. Great piece of American history. Okay, that's sarcasm, but continuing. 5 stars. Would 100% recommend. 1 star. Title: Abraham Lincoln. Vampire story, writing, message, plot. Okay, they're breaking it down, saying that they think everything sucked. I disagree. I thought that this movie did very well considering how bad it could have been. Like I said, if they had just fixed some of the problems with the big action set pieces, made it less like a video game, this would have hit the spot. It would have hit a solid 3 stars, no question. 5 stars, one of the best action movies of all time. Remember, it is not a historic movie, but an epic action movie. I'd say it didn't quite reach the epic part. Like I said, it could have if it had changed up the action sequences. Didn't quite reach epic, although it tried. It tried to take it serious enough to reach, that epic feeling. 3.5 stars. Although I'm having an admitted love affair for vampire movies, I also admit that I was conservative about seeing labeled as Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. I didn't know if it would be campy, corny. Should I be prepared to take it as a light or dorky comedy movie, or will it be serious? But once the origin began in the Civil War era and how it revealed the fate of the parents of young Abraham and his search for vengeance, I could see it is set to be a not only serious but fast-moving. Okay, so yeah, me too. I agree in that I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know anything about the book. I didn't know if this was going to be completely tongue-in-cheek comedy or it was going to play itself serious. I was pleasantly surprised because the title straight up suggests right in your face that it might be just a spoof. 2.5 stars. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is exactly what you'd expect. A fun action movie with an over-the-top story and pretty well directed fight scenes. I'll largely agree. 4 stars. The book I gave 5 stars. It is amazing at mixing history with fighting mythical creatures. The movie definitely takes liberties the book doesn't. I don't know because I didn't read the book. 5 stars. What a film. Blistering action, quality acting, better than Daniel Day-Lewis and Abraham Lincoln. In the top 5 films of my life so far. Foreshadowing is beautiful from the get-go. Well, I'll agree with something. The Abraham Lincoln movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, that is, a serious historical drama of sorts, but I tried to watch it and, I was expecting a drama and I didn't even get that out of it. I found it very boring. It went into political minutia and expected us to know who all the historical figures were, including all the, senators and etc. I couldn't get into it. I tried. I couldn't make it through more than 30 minutes. I wasn't expecting an action movie. I was expecting a historical drama, but it just didn't hold my attention. I didn't see what the big deal was. It was a bore fest to me, a snooze fest. And I like historical dramas. Let's continue. 3 stars. As a totally unapologetic, no-holds-barred, ridiculous, action-packed fantasy historical film, it was ludicrous fun and a dizzying high as long as you leave expectation and rationality behind. It was as much fun as a huge serving of cotton candy. I have to say I love Badass Abe with the axe. Yeah, I'll agree. It's up there with cotton candy. You don't want too much of it. Kids prefer it. Adults can't handle much of it usually, but it's good in small doses. Um, 4.5 stars. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. If you just read the name of the movie, you think it will be a crap B movie. That just sucks. If you watch the movie, however, you will see that it's a really good movie. The premise of the movie is the title of the movie. Sounds stupid, but they make it work. And I never heard of anyone who saw the movie that said it's bad. I was quite shocked when I saw that it had 35% of critics and 50% audience on here. I feel like people just couldn't get over Lincoln as a vampire. Yeah, that's probably a lot of it. There are flaws in the movie, like I said, but yeah, a lot of that, the title alone is going to have people rolling their eyes. So that's the problem with the premise. It's kind of targeted to only people that would entertain this type of scenario. 1 star, not a good movie to watch. 2.5 stars, whoever had the idea to make zombies and Abraham Lincoln deserves recognition, but the lack of cinema knowledge here feels awkward. If they're saying that they didn't do some of it right, maybe the video game type action sequences, then I'll agree. 4 stars. I loved this movie. I went in expecting it to be great and it didn't disappoint. Isn't the film. Lincoln and Mary's chemistry seemed genuine. Walker, Cooper, and Winstead were all fantastic. One of my favorites. Yeah, if you're into comic alternate histories, then yeah, this is pretty high on the mark for that. 2 stars. This is actually the first vampire film that I've watched from beginning to end, and I remember that I said it was decent, but not the best vampire film I have seen, though it's the first vampire movie. I didn't understand why at the time, but when I saw it on TV, not only did I understand why, but it kind of downgraded my opinion from decent to all right. Even though the premise is ridiculous, I can't help but give credit to the filmmakers for doing something that's new. Yeah, I think this might be somebody that, you know, the first time they didn't see the problems with the action pieces, and the second time I really saw it. First time I didn't get it so much, but the second time I really found some of the, particularly like I said on the railroad bridge, to be really bad. The first watch, though, I was carried up enough along in the plot and the action that kind of went over my head, the flaws in that. 4 stars. Despite its inane title, it's actually quite an entertaining and good movie, although it does take itself way too seriously, and there's a dreadful overuse of CGI, which wasn't always pulled off perfectly. It's still a fun flick with plenty of great actors and action sequences, but not to be confused with Abraham Lincoln vs. Zombies, which is apparently really shitty. Yeah, I did see that there is one called Abraham Lincoln vs. Zombies. I don't even feel I need to do a rotten review on that or see it, because since I hadn't heard of it until now, I'll just say that nobody really wants to see it. 3 stars. I now accept this as actual history. Well, I guess you could, but it's going to be difficult to work this in with the Marvel movies, because you're going to have to accept those as actual history too. It's going to be a lot to keep straightened out in your head. 5 stars. A must-see action adventure led by a great performance by Benjamin Walker. 5 stars if you've got posters of him on your wall. Okay. 2 stars. Produced by Tim Burton and directed by Timur Bekmambetov, best known for the action flick Wanted, and who also happens to be helming the Ben-Hur remake. Visually well done, but lacking pretty much in everything else. Well, if this was done by the director that did Wanted, okay, I can see where the flaws come from. I did appreciate Wanted. I liked the premise, but some of that too had serious problematic, with just the actual bullet physics. Some of it was okay, some of it was believable, if implausible, and some of it was straight up non-workable, even in a comic book sense, and that pulled me out of it. So I can see how, that director let, the action pieces become too much like video games, not enough actual logic in there. 3 stars, interesting point of view of one of the most beloved presidents of the USA, entertainment and clever at times, but probably you won't remember it after 3 days. Yeah, unless you're really a fan of this kind of alternate history, you won't remember it. It's just an action movie. It's nothing, as an action movie, it's nothing special. As an alternate history movie, it's kind of interesting. 2.5 stars. A ridiculous watch of a film. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter provides that so bad that it's good kind of way. Well, I kind of disagree. When you say it's so bad it's good, you're saying that this could become a cult favorite. It's great if you've had a beer or two. No, not really. You don't get laugh out loud to it. It expects you to take it serious, but it doesn't ham it up enough that you just like burst out laughing inappropriately. So no, I wouldn't say it qualifies as one of those films. 2.5 stars. Decent adaptation of the book and definitely an original concept as to why Lincoln wanted to gain power. Seeing one of America's most beloved presidents kicking ass was fairly entertaining. The script, however, is a little dry. The action is entertaining as well. With that being said, this movie is still pretty underwhelming when compared to other vampire action flicks like Underworld or Blade. I think they're reading they're reading too much into it. You can't compare this to like Underworld or Blade. Those movies in particular are supposed to come off as 100% serious. This one's not. Just the fact that they named it Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter tells you that they don't consider it to be 100% serious. So no, not comparable. 2 stars, boring, but how? Something like this should have just been amazing, right? Wrong. Yes, the characters and the plot is all there, but if it doesn't mesh together perfectly, it can all fall apart. No, it's not terrible. It's not the most cohesive film in the world. The intro is just ridiculous and doesn't explain anything, but there are some nice plot twists that come along the way. The end of the film is well weird and ridiculous and honestly turned me off from the film. You end up seeing 3 time frames in Lincoln's life. Well, yeah, that's a kind of a I didn't really like that much either. I thought it wasn't, a flaw in the movie. It could have been done better. But yeah, it kind of jumps between 3 different time periods in Lincoln's life. And just very briefly kind of tries to glue them together. It's a little bit jarring, and I wish it would have stuck with one and gone into detail on just one. But it needed to like wrap up his whole life for some reason involved with this vampire hunting, and it glued like 3 different time periods together. Again, I didn't like it that much either, but I don't think it outright killed the movie. It was just a little, jarring. 3.5 stars. President Lincoln's mother is killed by a supernatural creature, which fuels his passion to crush vampires and their slave-owning helpers. The secret life of our nation's favorite president as history's greatest hunter of the undead. Yeah, that's a good summary. It would be fitting for the cover of a DVD sleeve, but it doesn't tell me why you gave it so many stars. Okay, 2 stars. The film's idea was a very innovative one, and the movie has gore in it to justify its vampire hunter title, but the movie's story and character development is where the movie falls short. Yeah, it could have done a better job. It should have stuck with one period in Lincoln's life instead of hopping between 3, and give us a bit more depth to him. It didn't. But again, I don't think it's a fatal flaw. It doesn't ruin the whole film. It just lets it down quite a bit. We have a 3 star. We have a 4 star. Great movie, so much better than expected. 3.5 stars, not something that many people would be thought of would be a film. The most famous American president killing vampires. Recipe for disaster, you would think, but no, it's pretty good. Full of great action that kind of felt like 300 at times. Yeah, there's like a lot of that slow motion action, like 300 type. The effects were okay. The plot was okay, but nothing really new. I can't comment on the 3D as I watched the 2D version. Maybe some humor would have helped the dark and serious tone at times, as it takes itself too seriously and the acting wasn't great. Agree on all that. It takes itself too seriously. There should have been more humor. And yeah, they did use a lot of like slow-mo action effects, like, yeah, like in 300. 3.5 stars. This is the kind of movie where you really do get exactly what you would expect from a premise this ludicrous. That being said, I'd be lying if I said it isn't a fun ride. Uneven and even too strange for itself, but directed with a great deal of certainty. People have criticized the movie's lack of character definition and total disregard for coherent storytelling, but I mean seriously, the movie is called Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Allow me to say that one more time. The movie, yes, exactly. I think so too. Just the title of the movie is all the warning you need if you're not into this type of thing. This has been said many times. I've said it a few times. 1 star. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter has pretty good visuals, but it is melodramatic, stupid, has bad action, and is a terrible movie. Abraham Lincoln is a great man and should not be made fun of in a stupid movie like this. Actually, they don't make fun of him as a character. See, that's the complaint people have. If they had kind of made him more comical, it would have been more enjoyable in a lot of ways. But no, they straight up like just paid him respect, but did it in a strange way by saying that he was one of the good guys fighting vampires. But they didn't like try to make fun of him as a person or as a president. No, in fact, people are complaining mostly that it should have done more of that. 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this movie. I feel the only reason people did not like it was because people couldn't get over the character of Abraham Lincoln. Obviously, 90% of this movie is not true. I did enjoy that they did keep some aspects of his life and just added the vampire twist. Yeah, but it's not up to 4.5 stars. 2 stars. I don't know what I expected, to be honest, but this is very meh. Hope the book is better. I'm sure the book is better, especially if you've seen the movie first. I think the movie probably the book probably takes itself serious too, but you know, in a book you can actually do service to that. So I would expect, just a thought, that the book's probably better. 1 star, wow, no wonder it took so long for me to see this one. Trash. Well, yeah, if you're expecting some historical drama, you're going to have a problem here. Again, look at the title. 3 stars, good cinematography is the highlight of this very predictable movie. With its strange, somewhat attention-grabber title, it's Lincoln killing vampires. There really isn't much more to it. The movie is unique in the way it takes one of the most famous commander-in-chiefs of all time, throws in historic accuracy, and adds the fact he kills vampires for a living. Despite the absolute absurdity of it all, it's still somewhat entertaining. It combines a historical icon with creatures of the night. Very average film. Well, 3 stars isn't very average, so go down to 2.5 with me, and we're in agreement. I disagree on the accuracy. There's nothing historically accurate about this. The only thing that you might consider accurate is perhaps they got his age and the actual years of the Civil War correct. Otherwise, everything else is accurate. It might as well be the historical memory from a ninth grader that didn't pay attention in history class, because no, there's nothing accurate about it. 3.5 stars, not a bad storyline, if a bit dull. Yeah, I'll kind of agree. I thought it could have been better. It should have been more over the top. Should have made more fun of itself at times. I agree, it was too dull to be 3 stars. 0.5 star, what a bad idea to use a president as a vampire hunter. Again, you saw the title. I'm so sick of people using real presidents becoming vampire hunters and vampires turning invisible. I don't know where you live, where you've seen a lot of stories with presidents becoming vampire hunters. I hadn't heard of it before. Anyway, the plot horrible, the acting not bad, the script painful, the writing average, the directing not too entirely awful but still could do better, everything altogether mostly bad. Words to describe pitiful, bad, slight, horrendous, boring, unbearable, and meh. Score 4 out of 10. You're way too hard on this. Again, you should have checked most of that right from the title and just not watched the movie. Spare yourself the pain. 3.5 or 3 stars. This movie is a heck of a lot of fun. 2.5 stars. Very cheesy yet entertaining enough. 3 stars. While it's somewhat interesting to see Honest Abe kill vampires and the film is visually exciting, Abraham Lincoln Vampire takes its mashup premise itself a little too seriously, and its overall payoff may vary for those who come in expecting whatever they thought would come. Yeah, it takes itself too serious. We've said that. 3 stars. The ex-president of America was a vampire slayer? What an imagination. Who knows, in the near future we may see Mother Teresa portrayed as a ninja. After all, they have already made Sweet Snow White a swordswoman. The audience can embrace all this fantasy easily, provided that the movie is presented in a humorous way or as a parody. But the director decides to play things straight. It is hard to fault this movie technically. It is just difficult to take it seriously. Yes, it almost worked though. If the action had been better, if the character had been fleshed out a little more, playing it straight would have got this 3 stars or more. So it almost worked. So don't say it's just because they played it straight. They just didn't execute it properly. Now, as far as this fantasy where, yes, Snow White is a swordswoman in another movie, people complain all the time that they're tired of Hollywood just doing remakes and reboots and franchises that never die. That they're scared to do things that are original. But this is an example of Hollywood taking a risk on something original, and we should see more of this. Of course, some of it's not good, but some of the straight up, played straight, historically accurate action dramas are complete trash as well. I mean, sometimes they just don't work. But Hollywood should take more risks on films like this. I want to see more crazy ideas. Who knows? The next thing that sounds totally crazy might end up being the greatest movie of the next 30 years. You don't know that until you try it. So I disagree. They should take risks on films like this. 2 stars. The self-seriousness clashes with the ludicrous story, while the visual flair clashes with the over-stylized action editing. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter just doesn't work, plain and simple. Yeah, I'll kind of agree. It doesn't work. I'd say it does in some ways, though, so I give it 2.5. 1.5 stars. I write this as a fan of the book. The film is absolutely nothing like the original story. Whereas the book cleverly weaves the actual biography of Abraham Lincoln with fantasy, the film carelessly mashes the two together and soils the fascinating story of Abraham's life in the book. The silly idea of vampires being real makes beautiful love with actual historical facts. In the film, however, it rapes them. That's why the book appeals to intellects and was a bestseller. And the film, yeah, see, that's what I was thinking. In a book, you have a lot of room to make this mesh with the facts, the actual historical facts in a believable way, and you can play it straight. But in a movie, even with a 2-hour runtime, even if you go to a 2.5-hour runtime, yeah, it's going to be tough because you're asking people to like really believe a lot and take it seriously. It's very tough. 1.5 stars. Considering the film's ostensibly silly concept, it would have been far better if this were a comedy film, or better yet, a parody. Instead, we get a subpar fantasy action flick that fails because it takes its ridiculous premise way too seriously. In fact, the overly serious tone is what breaks suspension of disbelief to the point of no return. It's not just the vampire killing element that's flawed. Somehow it seems as though the writers changed history in order to make it fit the premise. Yeah, you would expect that because you're, in a film, you don't have much time. You're going to have to screw things around. Historically, you're going to have to do time jumps. You're going to have to put characters where they don't belong, etc., because you don't have the space of a book to pull this off. Otherwise, I'll agree with you, but I wouldn't say 1.5 stars. There was enough working in this movie to give it 2.5. 2 stars. Extremely enjoyable and fun. This fictional tale of Abraham Lincoln being a vampire hunter before and during his presidency is quite creative. The acting is quite good overall, with a great cast and interesting supporting characters. I'll largely agree with that, and it was fun. That's why I say that this could rise above 50%. It's almost there to not be rotten. In fact, it could work and be believable and not be rotten at all with just a few minor tweaks, improve some of the action set pieces. However, I don't see this going up or down anytime soon, if ever. I think this is going to stay at a 50% audience score. Nothing's going to budge it. I want Hollywood to do more stuff like this. I just want them to do it better, put more work into it, put more thought into it. And so I will see everybody again on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.